Before we get into it, I wanted to give you a little bit of a content warning. Some of today's stories contain sensitive topics that some viewers may find distressing. Also, if you wrote one of these stories and you don't want it on here, just contact me, show me the proof, and we'll take care of it. With all that said, let's continue. What is a supernatural event that happened in your life that just cannot be explained? I don't know if I'd call it supernatural, but it was freaky and I still don't understand. I was in the kitchen cleaning up, waiting for my kid's bus. I saw it pull up and saw him get off. He didn't come in, but he'd started playing around with hiding under the window to jump out at me and say boo. So I thought that's what he was doing. But I walked out and he wasn't there. I called his name and looked around the house thinking he was hiding from me, but I couldn't find him. I circled the house calling for him and the parent panic set in. It probably only lasted 90 seconds, but it felt a lot longer. Then his bus pulled up and he got off. I was very young, probably 7 to 8 years old. My mother had gone to the store and left me alone. This is the early 80s in a small Mississippi town, y'all. It was a different time. It had to be a Saturday morning because I was watching cartoons and I heard a knock at our front door. We didn't have a window or a peephole, and it's a small town, BFE nowhere, Mississippi. So I opened the door and there's an elderly man standing there, bleeding from his head. He was wearing these thick gold Coke bottle glasses and a bright red short-sleeved shirt with a pocket protector, blue jeans, and a belt buckle that had Eddie engraved on it in big letters. He said he was in a car accident down the road, and if I could please call the police and fire department, since his wife was trapped in the car. I told him to come and sit down on our porch. He did, and I shut the door. I went into the kitchen and called our local police department and told them about the incident. When they asked where the accident happened, I realized I didn't know, so I yelled out to the man, "What road did this happen on?" And I got no answer. I told the police to hold on, walked into the living room, and the man was gone. Like a fart in the wind. I didn't hear our squeaky-ass door open, so I knew he didn't leave. And there was an imprint on the couch from where he had been sitting. I looked in my bathroom to see if maybe he had gone in there to wash the blood off his head, and he wasn't there. I looked into my bedroom and my mom's bedroom. Nothing. When I came back to the phone, I told the police operator that he was gone, and I didn't know he had left. I gave them my address and the police and fire department came to my house. I told them about what happened, what the man had been wearing, everything. The police searched the area and found nothing. They talked to my neighbors who said they didn't hear anything and didn't see anyone matching the man's description. By this time, my mom got back home, and I got in trouble for making a false police call. Months later, when I got off the school bus one afternoon, there were police cars everywhere at my house. A detective was waiting inside with my mom and said he wanted to ask me some questions about the phone call I made about the man asking for help a few months previously. When I told him the story again and gave him the man's description, he went and just sat there staring at me open-mouthed. He thanked me for my time, told me I wasn't in trouble, and then gave me a police officer teddy bear. They talked to my mom for a bit and left. After they had been gone a few minutes, my mom called me back into the dining room and sat down at the table and told me the police had found the car that had driven off the road less than a mile from our house, and had found 2 bodies inside. One was thought to be male and the other female. The car was completely destroyed and upside down, about 60 yards off the road in a very rural and heavily wooded area, which is why it took them so long to find them. The body thought to be male was wearing the exact same clothes I had described. Both of them were pinned inside the car upside down, and both were still wearing their seatbelts. My family and friends treated me really weird for a long time. I had a phase in my mid-teens when I would read the obituaries in the local newspaper. I saw a name that was familiar, as it was the same as a family friend. It had the full first, middle, and last names. I didn't say anything to my parents since I figured they already knew. A few days later, my mom told me he died, and I said I knew since I saw his obituary. She said, "He died last night in his sleep." I went back through the newspaper, My mom kept them for a week before throwing them out. But the obituary wasn't there. When the real obituary came out, it had his first and last name, but his middle initial. This was almost 40 years ago, and I still think about it. Woke up to a weird feeling, and saw an opaque silhouette of a little boy standing on the other side of the apartment, facing me. I turned on my light and it was gone. When I turned my light off, I saw it again. Flipped the light back on and went over there to make sure there was nothing that could be causing a weird shadow, etc. There was nothing there that could have created that specific shape, and it was standing in the pathway between my couch and wall, so it couldn't have been a shadow. I turned my light off again, and there it was. Flipped it on again, and slept with the light on for the rest of the night. Couldn't sleep without the light on for days. I have two. One day about 20 years ago, I came home from work to find my dad dead on the sofa. He was cold to the touch, but I still called 911 and tried to resuscitate him in case there was any chance that I was wrong. My grandparents lived down the street. Their house was always the gathering place. People came for a cup of coffee every day. My dad had suffered from some brain injuries a few years prior, but had fully recovered and got sober, so his death was pretty unexpected. He was only 48. When the ambulance came roaring down the street, my grandmother said something along the lines of, "I hope that's not going to be my son's house." My uncle was in the kitchen at the time and said, "Nah, your son is at the door." He had seen my dad looking through the window next to the door. Of course, he was gone by that time. Still gives me chills. The other one is not nearly as dramatic. My wife and I live next to a golf course. One morning we were leaving at around 5 a.m. A golf cart with two guys crossed in front of us. Not dangerously close, but close. We remarked that it was pretty early for people to be out. I had never seen anyone out that early in the few years that I have lived there. I looked over to my left, and they were nowhere to be seen. This was a very open parking lot. We stopped and looked back, but no trace of any golf cart or anyone in general. My cousin had struggled with depression his whole life, and a few years ago things came to a head. He was 100% convinced that the only cure to his depression was suicide. That death was the only thing that would make him truly happy. We were close, so it hit pretty hard. After the funeral, my aunt told us that she had saw a helium-filled smiley-face balloon kind of float in front of her, then stop, and it just sat there for a minute. And then it flew up and away, out of sight on its own. When she told us this, we kind of brushed it off as a coincidence, but it kept happening to her over the next couple of weeks. We thought she had just recognized patterns, until I was at a music festival a few months later, and the exact same type of balloon, same color and everything, floated through my campsite and did the same exact thing where it stopped on its own, quote, stared at me, then kind of bobbed and flew up and away. I'm not really a believer in ghosts and the like, but I'm convinced in some shape or form that was my cousin telling us he was finally happy. Early into my now wife and I's relationship, I had a dream about her in childbirth. Very vivid and long. Like I spent days in the hospital with her and everything was in a strange twilight. When it came time to deliver, things went very wrong, and she and the baby ended up passing away. I woke up quite shook, naturally, but brushed it off. I'm a nurse and have to deal with traumatic OB situations before, and I chalked it up to me dealing with the stress through a dream. 6 years later, and my wife is pregnant. I have forgotten the dream by now. I get a call late into the third trimester while I am on my shift. Wife is going to the ER for a bad BP. I get off my shift and go to meet her. As soon as I step into the room, I remember my dream. It's the same damn room. Which is extra spooky because the hospital we were at wasn't even built when I had the dream. This is last year, right when lockdown started. My wife is admitted and they want to wait a week to deliver if possible. She'll be kept in a twilight state until that time. So it's me in the room, eerily isolated as the world around us is frozen, and my wife is incoherently mere feet away. Lingering for days in this room, I brushed off my dream, trying to manage my anxiety and stress. Come showtime, my wife gets ready to begin pushing, and it's exactly the same scenario as my dream. Things start going poorly, but the doctor thinks delivery is still possible. But at this point, I finally freak out into full panic mode and demand a C-section for my wife. The doctor, I can tell, wants to argue, but I think my outburst made her step back and reassess the situation, and she made the call for emergency C-section. It took about 10 minutes for me to get taken back, and as I'm in the OR, I see my baby come out lifeless. They do everything they can and manage to resuscitate her. In the meantime, my wife is doing poorly, and they are scrambling to control her bleeding. I follow the baby out, knowing there's nothing really I can do. Baby gets life-flighted to another hospital, but before I go, I see my wife stable and headed to the ICU. Both my wife and baby are critical, but alive. Today they are both thriving, and my baby is 16 months and just a tornado of energy. I don't know that they would be alive if not for that dream, and it causing me to freak out and demand a change in plan. If you like narrations like these, leave a like to let me know, and maybe comment one of your favorite subreddits or one of your favorite AskReddit threads. If I like your suggestion, I'll narrate it, and I'll pin your comment, as well as reference you in the next video. Until then, peace.